I don't remember really enjoying poetry when I was at school. Most of the poems that we read didn't seem to have anything to do with me. They were sort of by dead white men, and I didn't really understand them. They were being read to be tested on. But Shakespeare wasn't like that, and I remember when I was in year 9 reading Romeo and Juliet and performing sections of Romeo and Juliet and absolutely falling in love with that language. And when I do school events now, I go into, "O Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo? Deny thy father and refuse thy name, or if thou wilt not, be but sworn my love, and I'll no longer be Capulet." And then creepy Romeo goes, "Shall I hear more? Shall I speak at this?" And so that even, I mean, I'm able to say that, I'm able to recite that when I go to school events, and that's something that I learned how to recite when I was in year 9, and it's never left me. But I never really thought of that as poetry. I thought of that as play and as Shakespeare. So I suppose that, in a way, is what inspired me. And then as I got a little bit older, when I was 17, it's not poetry, but it's very poetic, are the novels of Virginia Woolf. I read Orlando, and I was just mesmerised by that language. And I didn't really know that you could write, or you could read for language before that. I thought you read for story. And then when I read that, I was more interested in the sounds of the words, really, than in what the character was doing. So I suppose those two things were what really made me fall in love with words. And then when I went to university, equally I was scared of poetry, and it seemed to be that people who knew more about language or had been to better schools were the ones reading poetry and the ones doing really well. And it wasn't until I became a teacher and I started to teach poetry that I really realised, oh, this is for everybody. This is for me. I've been locked out of something that was about me all along. And so, what I do when I go into schools is I try and encourage the kids not to be afraid. But not just that, I try and encourage the teachers not to be afraid, because they're the ones that are scared as well. And the teachers always go, "We're not afraid of poetry." I'm like, "You are, and you're lying," because I was you. And even me now, I write verse novels, and I'm asked, would you give a talk about poetry? And I think, me? I don't know anything about poetry. And I write it. So if I'm someone who's writing it and I have a good degree from a good university and I was a poetry teacher, I can only imagine how sort of kids feel in a classroom when someone slaps a poem by Byron down in front of them and says, "Right, tell me what it means." So I think the key is, as I always say, you start from the heart with poetry and then you move to the head.